A controversial senator who called for a final solution on Muslim immigration says politicians who condemned him are idiots.
We saw a speech that did not reflect the heart of this country. We saw a speech that did not reflect the strong, independent, multicultural, tolerant, accepting nation who we are.
I condemned the racist remarks of Senator Anning last night as soon as I heard of them, and I've condemned them already today, and I condemn them again here in this House.
There is no place in the Parliament for these outdated and racist views. I mean, to use the words final solution, to invoke the language the Nazis used during the Holocaust, to then go and attack Muslims, it is beyond the pale.
I'm tired of having to stand up against hate, against vilification, time and time and time again.
Senator Fraser Anning recently gave his maiden speech to Parliament. In it, he called for a reduction in taxes, a reduction in business regulations, a reduction in government spending, for the banks to be held to account, for new ports, for coal power plants, to save Australian agriculture, for new water infrastructure, for a return to gun rights, to restore free speech, to get rid of the nanny state, and to defend Australia from communist Chinese intrusion. He decried welfarism and called out false unemployment statistics. He called for a counter-revolution against far-left cultural Marxism, including radical gender theories. Most of all, he wants to return to the values that made Australia great in the first place. Did anyone hear about any of this in the media though? Did our leftist rulers counter any of the arguments he made with facts, evidence and reason?
Yeah, right, Matty!
Yeah, I shouldn't ask stupid questions. Rather than address his speech, they did what leftists always do when confronted with views outside what they deem acceptable. They played the man and cried,
"Racist! Racist! What a racist! What a racist!"
On January 26, 1788, the first fleet of British ships landed at Port Jackson and founded the first Australian colony. It was a hard slog, but over the course of the 19th century, these British settlers slowly built the nation we now know as Australia. They founded 6 colonies: New South Wales, Queensland, Tasmania, Victoria, South Australia and Western Australia. On the 1st of January 1901, Australia officially became a federated nation of the British Empire. Previously we were 6 self-governing colonies, but on that day the nation became the Commonwealth of Australia. This was a colony of the British Empire, founded on British values for mainly British people, but Europeans were welcome too. It was formed as a constitutional monarchy using the Westminster system of representative democracy, 2 houses and the Crown. The foundation of our legal system was British common law. Australia was then, and is now still, a British nation. There might have been a few people who weren't British, but these exceptions were not the rule. The facts of history are undeniable. So when Fraser Anning says this, he is completely right.
50 years ago, Australia was a cohesive, predominantly Anglo-Celtic nation. Most people thought of themselves as Christians, of some sort, although most of us didn't go to church all that often. Everyone from a cleaner to the captains of industry had a shared vision of who we were as a people and our place in the world. Until the late 1960s, prior to the rise of Whitlam in the Labor Party, there was a broad consensus between the Liberal and Labor parties of the kind of society we were and what we should be in future. In the 1960s, both Liberal and Labor parties reflected a common framework of Judeo-Christian values. Supporting the family as a basic unit of society, both supported the principle that marriage was a union between a man and a woman, and both parties recognised the sanctity of the lives of the unborn. Both major parties agreed that people should be free to live their own lives and say what they thought without fear of state sanction.
The speech was strong and he made a great statement in support of traditional Australian values. He is clearly a patriot who loves his nation. Yet, as Plato once said, no one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. Rather than discuss the body of the speech, the media leftist elite and their politician allies cherry-picked 2 words and went on an abusive dummy spit we've all come to expect from these sinful muppets. For those who don't know which words I'm talking about, see if you can spot them.
And finally, and really something which should go without saying, we're entitled to require that those that come here not only have useful work skills and qualifications, but also commitment to work and pay taxes. In truth, it appears that many of those who claim to be asylum seekers are actually just welfare seekers who only come here to Australia to live on welfare and public housing at the expense of working Australians. In the days of the Menzies, immigrants arriving here were not allowed to apply for welfare, and that attracted exactly the right sort of hard-working people this country needed. We should go back to that and ban all immigrants receiving welfare for the first 5 years after they arrive. The final solution to the immigration problem, of course, is a popular vote. Of course, we don't need a plebiscite to cut immigration numbers. We just need a government that is willing to institute sustainable population policy and end Australian job-stealing 457 visas and make student visas conditional on foreign students returning to the country they came from.
Did you hear it? Yeah, neither did I the first time, but here it is again.
The final solution to the immigration problem, of course, is a popular vote.
That's right, he used the term final solution, which apparently nobody is allowed to use anymore because the National Socialist German Workers' Party once used it. The reaction is about as over the top and idiotic as you could expect from the mainstream media, who have long since abandoned any veneer of balance in reporting. From the BBC, Australia MPs condemn final solution speech. From SBS, Fraser Anning and the use of the words final solution. From Perth Now, Nazi phrase final solution used by Qatar MP Fraser Anning in racist speech. Condiments law, you lose! Well spotted, mate. From News.com, fact-checking Fraser Anning's controversial final solution speech. This is actually a funny article that cherry-picks a few minor errors and uses research almost a decade old to somehow debunk the truth spoken.
That's funny. Since when did the media care about facts? I call bullshit.
That's right, Short Bus. It's ironic, but a topic for another time, alright?
Yeah.
From 9 News, Fraser Anning's speech, Senator says final solution comments taken out of context. From the far-left Sydney Morning Herald, Senator honours White Australia policy in first speech and calls for final solution on immigration. Incidentally, you should check out the comments of this article. Even on a far-left newspaper, many of the comments are in support of Anning. The tide is indeed turning against the leftist elite. From the extreme far-left commie rag The Guardian, MPs widely condemn Fraser Anning's final solution speech. Then there's the ABC, who took the mantle for stupidest, most hyperbolic rubbish of the day. Final solution, here's the Nazi history of the phrase used by Fraser Anning. They even included a picture of Jewish prisoners to hammer the point home. You get the gist. Rather than address the arguments made, the leftist establishment went hammer and tongs invoking Godwin's law, making the utterly absurd claim that the words final solution are somehow owned by the Nazis. The Holocaust was a horrible event that should never have happened. Trying to equate this speech to it is an insult to what was a tragic episode in human history. It is using human suffering to make an irrelevant political point. This episode was created by socialism, I might add. On that note, I'd like to point out a few companies that did actually collaborate with the Nazis, some of whom were founded and owned by members of the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Those brands include, but are not limited to, Volkswagen, Coca-Cola, Hugo Boss, BMW, Adidas and Puma, Allianz and Siemens. Siemens. Come on, grow up. Where's the condemnation of these actual Nazi collaborators? Surely if a couple of words once used by Nazis means you're an evil National Socialist, even when you're not a socialist, then using one of these brands must be even worse, right? On that note, we have actual socialists in Parliament, some of whom had the nerve to condemn Fraser for using those same words. Why is it that choosing two words once used by the National Socialist German Workers' Party suddenly makes you a Nazi as well, but sharing the foundation of their political views is totally fine?
That doesn't make any sense at all!
I know, right? They're complete idiots. Not to mention vile bigots and racists.
Right, why are they racist?
Great question, Short Bus. It's simple, really. Were Fraser Anning any other race, and I mean literally any race other than white, had he called for the protection of his own culture, not only would the media consider it not racist, they'd praise it. The New York Times even hired a woman who flat out made racist comments against whites. The only reason they are calling Fraser Anning racist is because he's white.
Right, that's racist as hell!
Yeah, who let all the racists into Parliament? I never voted for them.
By God, you're right, Matty. Holy hell, all three of our major parties are racists. We need new leadership. I, for one, cannot accept such bigotry and hatred. Me neither. Racism, aka hatred based on race, is a horrible thing. In fact, the left have used the term for decades to shut down debate. Whenever they don't like what you have to say, they call you a racist. Therefore, given I've proven these leftist muppets in our parliament are all racists, that means they should be shamed out of public life by their own logic. Why is it that none of them have resigned? I guess racism against whites is totally okay. The major parties couldn't pass up a chance to virtue signal and decried Anning as ma-racist and ma-Nazi. There were tears, there was emotional hand-wringing, there were cries of, "Oh, won't someone please think of the immigrants?" Adam Bandt even went so far as to attack anyone for speaking out about the extreme overrepresentation of Africans in crime.
Please stop telling the truth, please. Think of the poor taxpayer-funded refugees. We can't deport them. We need more Green voters.
The idiot even said someone might be killed if the rhetoric didn't stop. Newsflash, Adam. Africans are already stabbing, beating and robbing us. Is violence okay when Africans do it to whites? Do we deserve it because white privilege or something? Racist? The best reaction of the lot came from Tony Bourke, who made a right fool of himself.
Don't give them what they want. That's a question that you always ask when there's an appalling speech.
Actually, that's a statement, not a question. You'd think our MPs would at least know the difference. Then again, he is a leftist.
Don't give them what they want. They want to incite a debate, and the debate, when it happens, when you hit back, is exactly what they might have hoped for.
There you go. We aren't even allowed to debate the issue. Who are we, the Australian people, anyway? Apparently we are mere tax cattle for the far-left oligarchy to milk pensions and power.
But there has to be a point when this Parliament says enough.
Apparently this doesn't apply when the people say enough to immigration. Apparently it only applies to MPs who don't want to debate or represent the people who voted for them.
And if we haven't reached that point tonight, then for some of us there is apparently no limit at all.
Translation:
Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up!
He's decided to invoke the term final solution.
Oh no! I just did the same thing!
Another speech wanting to incite debate.
You see, they don't want debate. They want to keep you in your place, peasant. Our betters have spoken. What's democracy anyway?
Muslim Australians, African Australians, Chinese Australians, when you invoke the final solution, Jewish Australians, in the same way as in years gone by, Greek Australians and Italian Australians.
That's funny, because he said this 15 seconds earlier.
Another speech dividing the nation.
He's obviously too stupid to see the irony.
Just like we've had the so-called person in charge of multicultural affairs claim that we've got all these monocultural areas throughout Australia. The film crew and the journo who was there were good enough to say, well, which monoculture? Is it the Arabic culture represented by that shop, or the Vietnamese culture represented by that shop, the Pakistani, the Pacific Islander? Which monoculture are you talking about? To which Lauren Southern said, well, there isn't even an English pub. And they said, well, there's actually one immediately behind you.
Wow, you got her there, numbnuts. I mean, there was a pub across the road. That makes it all okay. Who cares about losing our culture and our nation? Lakemba has a pub, everyone. All is well in the world. How about we check out Lauren's video?
As soon as we arrived in Lakemba, things were tense. There were heads turning, people coming out of shops to look at us and find out what we were doing. Men started yelling in Arabic across the street at us. I hadn't even been in Lakemba 10 minutes before someone had tipped off the media, and they came running to combat me and tell me this was a perfectly safe area and I had nothing and no reason to be there. Almost immediately, the media story was proven to be wrong. As we went to go for a walk to the local mosque, a very high-ranked police officer came up to me and begged with me, do not go there.
I wonder why he conveniently ignored the fact that Lauren Southern was marched out of Lakemba because their presence was likely to cause the Muslims to riot. Also noticed a distinct lack of white people. In fact, the only white people there were Lauren and the journalists. It's all good though, they have a pub.
Our diversity is nothing to be afraid of.
Then why are you so afraid to talk about it?
We had the government introduce university-level English test, but you didn't have to reach university-level English if you were immigrating from the 5 English-speaking nations that are predominantly white. Canada, the United States, Ireland, the UK or New Zealand. They didn't have to do the test.
What other language would they speak? What a moron!
Exactly! It's to test the English skills, you idiot! Why would we need to worry about Anglo's ability to speak their own damn language? What a moron!
We have the member for New England constantly in his book, Weatherboard and Iron, referring to the poor, white regional fringe. Why is the white reference there all the time?
Why the hell not? Why are white people not allowed to have a voice? Why are white people second-class citizens? Why are white people not allowed to have a culture and a heritage? This speech is as racist as it gets. But, you can't be racist against whites, and he's white too. 1, that's racist, and 2, self-hatred is still hatred. Also, remember this.
Muslim Australians, African Australians, Chinese Australians, Jewish Australians, in the same way as in years gone by, Greek Australians and Italian Australians.
He must have a bad memory. Fraser Anning's speech kicked a soy nest of far-left virtue signalling and hand-wringing. It highlighted without a doubt our so-called leaders do not represent us. Both major parties are united in their leftist anti-Westernism and have the full backing of the mainstream leftist press. I disagree with plenty of what Anning said. I don't agree with his call to keep the old age pension. I don't like his infrastructure proposals, although I'd be happy to discuss them, especially when it comes to energy. I don't even agree that we should exclude all non-whites from this country, or that a little bit of ethnic diversity is a bad thing. Where I do agree is that those of other ethnicities are obliged to fully integrate into the Australian way of life. That means the Western way of life. I have no issue with individuals of non-European backgrounds joining our nation, but if they wish to join us, they need to dispense entirely with the culture they came from and become 100% Australian in their beliefs, attitudes and actions. They need to speak Australian, think Australian, act Australian, and be Australian in every sense. This becomes utterly impossible with mass immigration when ethnic enclaves form and new migrants have absolutely no incentive to integrate into the wider community. It is not racist to want to protect one's own ethnic heritage either. In fact, calling that racist is in and of itself racist. Nor is it racist or even unreasonable to call for an end to Islamic immigration, given the fact that Islam isn't a race and Muslims are 3 to 4 times more likely to be in prison than the general population. Not to mention their clear lack of integration with the wider community, the threat of terror, and the troubles now plaguing Europe due to Middle Eastern economic migrants. Fraser Anning's speech was a call to our nation and values. It was a call to the small government liberal nationalism that made us rich and free. Sure, you can disagree with him, but the idiotic over-the-top stupidity from low IQ sycophantic losers in Parliament and the media is exactly what's wrong with this nation today. If you can't respond with reasoned arguments and instead respond with cries of You are simply admitting you don't have an argument and thus conceding the point. Sure, he made a few factual errors regarding the religion of African gangs and the Bourke Street Killer, but this is irrelevant as it doesn't weaken his general argument. In fact, they highlight where he was right. Attempting to silence and censor debate will not have the effect these leftist elites want. It is a proven fact that forbidding certain opinions only increases the desire to hear them. Fraser Anning used his God-given right to free speech, and the buffoons attacking him need to suck it up because he has nothing to apologise for, and there are plenty of people who agree with him. I may disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Fraser Anning did absolutely nothing wrong.
I just realised why politicians always stuff everything up. If they ever actually solved a problem, that'd make it the final solution.
That's terrible, Short Boss.
I know.